The headlights appeared at exactly the time Cynthia had calculated. She was sitting in the small parlor when she heard the low hum of an engine slow outside the compound gate. Joy stood by the window, pretending to straighten the curtains. Their mother had asked no questions. She had simply looked at Cynthia's face when she came back inside, understood something significant was happening, and quietly disappeared into the kitchen. That was the thing about Nigerian mothers. They always knew when to stay close without being seen. Cynthia did not move from her chair. A knock came at the gate. Firm, deliberate. The knock of a man who was not used to waiting but had decided tonight he would wait as long as necessary. Joy looked at her sister. Should I? Yes. Let him in. Joy moved toward the gate. Cynthia straightened in her chair, smoothed her wrapper with both hands, and took one slow breath. She heard the gate open. She heard footsteps on the compound ground. Unhurried. Measured. Then the parlor door opened, and Shin Jae-won stepped inside. He looked exactly as she remembered. Dark clothing. Perfectly composed posture. The kind of face that gave nothing away unless you had spent 8 months learning its language. Which she had. But something was different tonight. He looked tired. Not physically. Something deeper. The kind of tired that lives behind the eyes. He stopped when he saw her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said, simply, "You look well." "You flew thousands of kilometers," she replied. "I hope you didn't come all this way to tell me that." The corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. Almost. Joy quietly excused herself from the room. The door clicked shut behind her. They were alone. Jae-won looked around the small parlor slowly. The plastic-covered sofa. The family photographs on the wall. The thin curtains moving in the evening breeze. It was a world so far removed from the Shin Grand Estate that it might as well have been another planet. Yet he did not look uncomfortable. He looked like a man taking in something he had never allowed himself to see before. "Sit down," Cynthia said. He sat across from her. He placed his hands on his knees and looked at her directly. No deflection. No cold boardroom distance. "I'll start from the beginning," he said. "Please." He was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then he spoke. "My father arranged the marriage when I was 31. Your father and mine had an agreement that went back further than either of us knew. Land, alliance, protection. The Adelik family had what my organization needed to expand into West Africa. My family had what your father needed to protect his assets from people who had been watching him for years." Cynthia's expression didn't change. She had already known this part. "I was told I was getting a wife," Jae-won continued. "I was not asked. I was told. And I accepted because in my world, you accept what your family requires of you. That is simply how it works. So, I was a requirement. At the beginning." He held her gaze. Yes. The honesty landed like a stone in still water. She had expected him to soften it. He didn't. "And Article 7? She asked. He didn't flinch. "Article 7 was my father's condition. Not mine. He believed that a marriage without an heir within the first year was an unstable alliance. He built the clause in without my knowledge." Cynthia's eyes narrowed slightly. "Without your knowledge. I found it 4 months into our marriage." She stared at him. "You found it 4 months in?" "Yes." "And you said nothing to me?" "No." The room went very quiet. Outside, somewhere in the compound, a door closed softly. The generator hummed steadily. "Why?" Her voice was calm. Dangerously calm. Jae-won looked down at his hands for the first time. "Because I didn't know how. Because every time I tried to find the words, I looked at you, and I—" He stopped. "You what?" He looked back up. "You were always smiling, Cynthia. Even when I gave you nothing to smile about. You would set a place for me at dinner when you had no reason to believe I was coming home. You learned 3 Korean dishes in the first month because you wanted me to feel comfortable in my own house. You never complained. You never demanded anything." She said nothing. "I didn't know what to do with someone like you," he said quietly. "Every person in my life has always wanted something from me. Power. Money. Protection. Fear. You just wanted me to come home for dinner." A long silence passed between them. "So instead of telling me the truth," Cynthia said slowly, "you looked through me. Every day? For 8 months. I was protecting myself. From me. From what I was starting to feel." He said it plainly, without drama, without decoration. The way a man states a fact he has spent a long time refusing to accept. Cynthia looked at him for a long moment. The parlor felt smaller than it ever had. The evening outside had deepened into full night. Somewhere nearby, her mother was almost certainly listening from the hallway and pretending she wasn't. The 12 months end in 4 weeks, Cynthia said. I know. If I don't return, my family loses the land. Yes. And you came here to bring me back before the deadline. Jae-won looked at her steadily. I came here because I owe you the truth. What you decide after that is entirely yours. That's a very careful answer. It's the only honest one I have. Cynthia stood up slowly and walked to the window. The compound outside was dark and familiar. The mango tree her father had planted when she was 7 years old stood in the corner, its branches wide and unbothered. She had climbed that tree as a girl, believing the world was simple, believing love was simple. If I go back, she said without turning around, I go back as your wife. Not your arrangement. Not your clause. Not the woman your father selected from a contract. I understand. I'm not finished. She turned to face him. If I go back, you look at me. Every day? You come home for dinner. Not every night. I know what your life is. But some nights, Jae-won. Some nights you choose the table over the boardroom. He said nothing. He was listening. Completely. And the contract, she continued. Article 7. I want it dissolved. Whatever legal mechanism exists in your world to remove that clause, you use it. My family's land is not a bargaining chip. It was never yours to hold. Already done, he said. She blinked. What? 3 days ago, before I boarded the plane. He reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. He placed it on the low table between them. The clause has been removed. Your father's land is fully and unconditionally returned to the Adelic family regardless of what you decide tonight. Cynthia looked at the document. She did not pick it up immediately. She looked at it the way a person looks at something they want very much to believe is real. You did this before you knew what I would say. Yes. Before you knew if I would even agree to see you. Yes. Why? He stood up slowly and looked at her across the small parlor. Because it was right. Because that clause should never have existed. And because I needed you to know that whatever happens between us has nothing to do with land or alliances or deadlines. He paused. If you come back, I want you to come back for the right reason. And if you don't, I want to know that I at least did one thing in this marriage that was completely yours. The generator outside hummed. The mango tree stood still. Somewhere in the hallway, there was perfect silence where moments before there had been the faint shuffle of slippered feet, which meant her mother had heard everything and was now quietly composing herself. Cynthia looked at this man standing in her mother's small Legos parlor in his expensive dark clothing, looking more uncertain than she had ever seen him look in 8 months of marriage. More human, more real. She picked up the document from the table. She read it slowly, every line, every clause. Then she folded it carefully and held it. Joy, she called. Joy appeared in the doorway almost immediately, which confirmed she had also been listening. She looked between Cynthia and Jae-won with enormous eyes. Bring our guests some tea, Cynthia said. Joy's face broke into a wide smile she tried unsuccessfully to hide. She disappeared back into the kitchen. Cynthia looked at Jae-won. Sit down, she said again. This time it sounded different. Softer, like an invitation rather than a direction. He sat. She sat across from him. You have the rest of the evening, she said quietly. Tell me everything. From the beginning. The real beginning. Not the contract version. Yours. For the first time since walking through that gate, Shin Jae-won's shoulders dropped slightly. The tension that lived permanently across them loosened just enough to be visible. And then, slowly, carefully, he began to talk. He talked about his father. About a childhood spent learning that power was the only reliable currency. About choosing the estate over everything warm that had ever tried to reach him. About the first morning he had watched Cynthia set his place at the breakfast table and felt something move in his chest that he had spent the entire day trying to explain away. She listened. She asked questions. Real ones. The kind she had swallowed for 8 months. Outside, Lagos continued its evening. Children called to each other across compounds. Music drifted from a nearby street. The mango tree stood exactly where it had always stood. Joy brought the tea and left without a word, which was remarkable self-control for Joy. Their mother appeared briefly in the doorway, looked at them both, said absolutely nothing, nodded once at Jae-won with the dignified authority that only a Nigerian mother of a certain age can produce, and disappeared again. Jae-won watched her go. Should I be afraid of her? Deeply, Cynthia said. He almost smiled again. This time it reached his eyes. They talked until the compound grew fully quiet and the tea went cold and the night settled completely around the small house. At some point, without either of them deciding it, the conversation stopped being an explanation and became something else entirely. It became two people finally meeting each other properly. When Jae-won finally stood to leave, it was past midnight. Cynthia walked him to the compound gate. They stood on either side of it for a moment, the way they had stood on either side of everything for 8 months. "I'll need a few days," she said. "Take the time you need. I'm not the same woman who left that estate." "I know." He looked at her. "She was remarkable. I imagine you are even more so." Cynthia opened the gate. He stepped through it. Then he turned back one final time. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "the first morning you set my place at the table and I walked past without sitting down, I stood in the hallway for 3 full minutes before I made myself keep walking." She looked at him. "Why are you telling me that now?" "Because you deserve to know that you were never invisible to me." He held her gaze. "I was simply a coward." He walked to the waiting car. The door closed. The headlights came on. Cynthia stood at the open gate and watched until the car disappeared around the corner and the street was quiet again. Then she closed the gate softly, turned around, and found both Joy and her mother standing on the veranda looking at her. She looked back at them. "I said nothing," her mother said immediately. "You were in the hallway the entire time," Cynthia replied. "I was nearby, in case you needed me." Joy was practically vibrating. "So, what are you going to do? Are you going back?" "Cynthia, are you going back?" Cynthia walked past both of them toward the door. "I told you," she said. "Put on the kettle." "You cannot keep saying that," Joy called after her. But Cynthia was already inside, and for the first time in 47 days, she was smiling. Not the kind of smile she wore to survive. The quiet kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and real and unhurried. The kind that means something has finally, after a very long time, begun. And that is where the story ends. Not with a dramatic reunion. Not with grand promises. But with a man who flew across the world to tell the truth he should have spoken 8 months ago. And a woman who was strong enough to make him earn every word of it. Sometimes the most powerful thing in any room is not the man everyone fears. It is the woman who refuses to stay where she is not truly seen. If this story touched you, please like this video right now. Subscribe to Soul Stories and turn on your notifications so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments, did Cynthia make the right decision? Where are you watching from? I read every single comment. Thank you so much for staying until the very end. I will see you in the next story.